Finally, it rises.
Hey, it's ODB, the Lincoln Addict, back with another video. Thanks for the support. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Let's jump into this 1962 Lincoln Continental Convertible. What I'm going to do is not go into my normal presentation that I kind of put together for these said cars, because this car has been reviewed in the past by myself, and Bring a Trailer does a fantastic job here of reinforcing, of course, hyperlinking as well, to talk about the fact that this car sold in September 2021 and in May of 2022. Now, for those that may recall, when it sold the first time via Bring a Trailer, it was 95,000, and of course that was just over 3 years ago in September of 2021, as I alluded. It then sold about a half a year later, give or take, for 80,000 in May of 2022. So those were two previous auctions on this car. So I want to talk about a couple of key things, and then you can decide if this is a car that you're looking to make a purchase on. We can see, obviously, a very beautiful car, front three-quarter shot showcasing those longer rectangles for the 62 model year on the grille. You have the very distinctive 14-inch wheels and wheel covers, aka hubcaps. We can also see, we know in 62 they have the clear turn signals in the front. Of course, that does change to amber for 1 year in 63. Now, this car is currently located in New York. Haven't recently mentioned this, but obviously that's a key thing anytime you're looking to purchase a car, trying to kind of understand where it's at geographically, so that you can get said car either picked up or transported to you. This does look like it's a dealer, so maybe someone purchased it with hopes to, maybe hold on to it a few years. Obviously now, 2.5 years later, and then possibly flip it, or maybe just enjoy it for that short period of time and say, hey, it's ready to move on to the next owner. A few things that you will note, and I am going to zoom in here. Hopefully this is easier to see. We can see that, we'll see in a moment, that this is an early model year car for the 62 model year. So we're talking September of 61 this one wouldn't have been built, and because it was the 791st off that production line for that model year, you have two distinct things. One, you have the keyhole cover, and I don't have the date in front of me, but I believe it was the first week in November this had ended. They stopped adding the keyhole cover, which is basically a 61 only item. However, rest in peace, Tim Nill. In the past, Tim reinforced this to me because he had a 62 with this. Chris Dunn at Lincoln Land and others have reinforced, and this is in the authenticity manual as well. But basically, you have the keyhole cover for those first couple of months for production, let's say 3 months or so. You also have the longer L on the Continental quarter panel scripting. Now, it is kind of hard to see here. We'll look at some other photos, but if I recall correctly, this does have the longer L. I've talked a little bit about that. Lincoln did make the change because, wash rags and, hand washes and things like that the owners were doing, it was snapping off the tail end of the L. So that's pretty cool. And it's neat to see those because, when folks broke those over the course of time, they would go and pick up another one, or, and often they're not always the longer L. So that's kind of a cool little thing. There's, of course, a full-size spare in the trunk, which they mentioned. I really like the interior on this car. I think it's a great color for it. I love the authenticity of the seats. They're not perfect. You can see a little bit of weather to them, weathered wear, if you will. We know in 62, and then you guys always keep me honest, at some point in 63, the door tag here moves to the actual door. It is, I often describe, kind of in this lower wheel well, or kind of footwell rather, area. So your foot would rest here, and then right here is the VIN tag. That is the correct location, of course. Again, just a beautiful color interior. Not perfect, but certainly the way I like them. One of the things that stood out to me as soon as I saw this image is I recalled going over and reviewing this one in the past, and of course, that's what we have here. We have this speaker pod that's in the rear, and that kind of stuck out to me. And of course, that reinforces that this was a car I've seen previously. Now, the engine bay on this car is what I would say something that you're going to typically see from one of these cars that was, pretty well kept, garage kept, enjoyed on the weekends, driven around. It's certainly not perfect. Uh, I've owned cars like this, and you kind of look in here, and it looks nice, right? The top of the air cleaner, the top of the expansion tank, everything is there, which is really the key thing for me. But certainly, if you were looking to kind of detail this car to the nines, you may end up kind of jumping in and doing some stuff here in the engine bay. You can see a little bit of the paint peeling on the air cleaner and things, but again, that's all minor. It's really what's on the inside, right? Which is the key thing with any engine and setup. Being that the manifolds probably have never came off, I would reinforce to folks that these cars are known to have a manifold leak, especially on the passenger side, and that often is cured with just throwing in some new gaskets. There's a brand called Remflex that a lot of folks use. It's a little bit thicker of a gasket, and that's only if you hear that kind of popping sound, that annoying sound from the exhaust. But certainly, again, that's just some knowledge I wanted to put out there. We can see that it is an AC car, which is fantastic. It is the 3-port, which is good, fuel pump, and then it does have the single pot reservoir for the brake setup. We can see here, this is another good thing. They do provide undercarriage photos. What I would tell you is this car looks very nice from underneath from what we can see. Certainly, we've seen cars that don't look good underneath, but everything I can see here, this is all solid, which is great. The exhaust, you can kind of tell here with some of the welds, at some point somebody went in here and did replace it. As long as there were no leaks or anything like that, you wouldn't have to necessarily think about replacing any of that, but it would just, you'd have to listen for any leaks at all. Here, of course, Spring and Trailer does a great job. I usually will kind of add a little bit of intel to this, which I kind of already did, being that if you look here in this model year, it does begin with a 4, so we kind of ignore that. And then you've got a 00791. 791 represents the 791st unit out of that consecutive unit number, if you will, for that particular model year. Bring a Trailer goes down here to reinforce. Of course, J represents September, and 05 represents the day of the month. So September 5th, and again of 1961, because they start ramping up in that third quarter of the year to be ready for the 62 model year. So very early, less than the 1000, if you will, for that particular model year. All the information's pretty standard. It was a black car, which is key, and then they consider that a beige leather interior. We could see a point of view, and I don't know if it's going to let me view this. Sometimes I have noticed that it'll ask me to log in. And yeah, I think it's going to, but I didn't pre-log in, so I know that's just like a standard, I think, YouTube thing to make sure it's not a bot. But you basically have a drive video, which is great, fantastic, and then you have a cold start and idle video as well. Really, this is the meat and potatoes of the listing. Of course, any photos. The thing I will point out is that the paint is not perfect on this car. That's okay, right? To me, it's a very, very good driver quality. You're going to see as you go through these photos, and I'm kind of just clicking through them here, just clicking the right arrow on my keyboard as I go through these. They do a good job of showcasing that there is some kind of spider web effect, if you will, in that black paint. If you've ever owned a black car, these are not easy to keep super clean, especially if you're kind of OCD about it. The top to me does look really nice. It looks very kind of presidential, so to speak, with the black top. To me, that's fantastic. That is always a good thing. Kind of the money shot here. You've got the hood open, you've got the deck lid open, and then you've got all 4 doors open as well. So far, I'm liking what I'm seeing. and the link is in the description if this is something that you want to see more of or you want to kind of click through. You can see here again, this is kind of what I call the spiderweb effect. I'm not a paint on body person, but certainly I will tell you, having owned one black car prior, they're not easy to maintain in terms of keeping them spotless. You got a little bit of what appears to be kind of like a little bit of orange peel. I think it's referred to in the industry of the paint, but I believe that they mentioned that this was a paint job, a repaint at some point. So we can look back in the description for that. Here we see a good photo again of the keyhole cover, 61 only, and then of course early 62 models as well. A bunch of detailed photos. A lot of this stuff. To me, this is a nice car. For someone that kind of wants something that's more of a driver. It's got a little bit of authenticity to it in terms of the fact that it's not perfect, and you could always go and if you want to take it over the top and get it painted, right, and detail the engine bay. Those are things that you could do. So we'll have to see where this one ends. One thing I like about the 61, 62, 63s is the gas filler, of course, is in that rear deck lid trim. So you can see, like, just above this is the deck lid. This kind of folds down, if you will, or flips down, rather, and then you would fill the fuel there. In 64, it moves to the rear quarter panel, of course. You can see the distinctive dash in 62 here. We also see the Ultronic Eye, which is the automatic headlight dimmer. That was a feature. It was not standard, so that's key. There is a sticker here for Clifford. Clifford, I think, was part of DEI, which made the Viper alarms, if I remember correctly. And so it probably has some sort of maybe alarm. I know it has I think a head unit in the glove box, if I remember correctly, which would tie into the little speaker pods in the rear. Now, you got to remember the front driver seat belts, I want to say, weren't available until 64 as like a standard, maybe even as a feature. I sometimes will get that confused because they came along for the front, and then the rears came, I think, a year or two later. But I don't mind these. At some point, somebody goes, hey, let me go ahead and add some seat belts, and you kind of have what I refer to here as almost like a it reminds me of an airplane type latch. So I think that these do look well here. You could always get some out of another Lincoln model year if you wanted to, but certainly the way the seat looks, again, it's not perfect. You see some discoloration here, but I would take this original leather over something that's redone any day. You put a little bit of time and effort. There's a bunch of different methods to kind of steam some of this, and you could have it professionally done, or you could kind of look into it with some Griots products. They sponsor the podcast as well. And you could certainly clean those up if that's something you wanted to do. Again, with an AC car, that's fantastic because you're typically going to have a 10% more value. I think the wood, that trim is not perfect, but it looks really, really good. And again, I like the originality of the look and feel of this one. Of course, in 61 through 63, you've got the more elegant rear view mirror that kind of comes down from that front header panel area, which I think is fantastic. You can see they do a good job detailing, the different aspects of the car. Lots of good photos, which is fantastic. The interior, for the most part, stays the same through 63, and then, of course, in 64, that is something that changes. Now, something I want to point out that I haven't really talked about that I was going to mention when I get to the interior type podcast episodes that I plan here on the YouTube channel is, if I remember correctly, Chris always reinforces this to me. In 60 up through 62, I think it was a generator, and then I believe in 63, the gauge cluster says alternator. So that's one very, very minor difference, and it's just because these cars had a generator, I believe, through 62, and then in 63 that goes to an alternator. So not going to get into all of that, but that's some changes that were happening around that time. We can see the deck lid here and the trunk. The trunk is great because it has all of that material there, so you kind of get a complete trunk. We can see in here the skeleton, if you will, where it's attached to that outer skin. You do have some of the typical little, rusting and moisture and things like that. And again, as I've reinforced, that is something that happens pretty much on all of these cars, especially in Florida where the moisture is so high. I'm dealing with that with my cars, but that's not a deal breaker, certainly, especially if there's not holes on the outside. Even if there are, you can get that stuff repaired through a good body shop. There's a few more photos here, again, of the engine bay. What we can see, some wire loom was added. That's typical. Typically, you're going to have a little red wire in here for your coil. Someone did that. But again, you have the 3-port. You also have the fan shroud, which is fantastic. It is an AC car, so it would have that. But then you also have this insulation on the fuel lines, which will help, believe it or not, with the whole vapor lock challenge that so many experience with these cars. And again, if you look at the aprons and where the headers are at, I mean, these engine bays just build a lot of heat overall. We can also see here that it has the speed control, also known as cruise control. So I'd like to point that out. One of my cars also has, the insulation under the hood that kind of looks, actually mine looks worse than this. This isn't that bad at all, and certainly you can find different vendors that sell that material if that's something you want to change. Again, here we see a close-up of some information that we looked at prior. I mentioned a comment in here. Other folks were kind of talking about the driving video and things like that, so that was great. What do you think this car will sell for? I believe it's going to go for 60 plus thousand. I do believe it would hit that number. I think this is a nice car overall. If I could go and look at it, I think that would be optimal. And I always reinforce that if you're looking to spend that kind of money, unless you feel very confident with the photos, maybe you talk to the seller on the phone and things like that. But certainly, I think someone's going to get a nicer car. Often I'm asked, what's the most desired out of 61, 62, 63? It's really what you like. A lot of folks like 61. I like 62 a lot, and I love the 63 grill. So I kind of like parts and bits and pieces of each of those 3 years. 64, 65 are, my personal favorite. I like the changes to the dash and things like that. But oftentimes folks like that more original style design, if you will, of the 61 and up to 63. So it's really whatever you desire. Again, if you could leave a comment below, that helps with the algorithm, and consider subscribing. I certainly appreciate it. Stay on the rise, and if you're happy to hear this before Christmas 2024, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Take care.